Hello and welcome. My name's Craig D'Souza. I'm the CEO of the Creative Industry Association. And today I am talking to Paul Antonio. I know him as a fabulous human being and a great friend. He is the scribe in my eyes, but I'm going to let Paul tell you all about him and what he does. Paul, my lovely friend, hello, welcome, and over to you. Tell me and the audience all about you.
Oh, Craig, it's really lovely to see you again. Thank you so much for having me on. It's funny, I expected to see you a couple of weeks ago at Paper World, but that never happened. And it's sort of the crux of your year, and you're sort of looking forward to it. You're really excited to see the new products and to see your friends and to hug people, and that's sort of been a very different experience this year. Again, thank you so much for having me on. So my full name is Paul Antonio Atong. I very rarely use my last name because people always misspell it or they mispronounce it, and so I just stick with my first and middle name. I run Paul Antonio Scribe Limited, which is also and my sort of social media handles. My social media handle essentially is PAScribe, because I decided to shorten it because I absolutely hate typing. And fiddling with your thumbs, typing, Paul Antonio Scribe, I just thought PAScribe would be great.
Writing's your job.
Right, but not typing.
Okay, all right, okay, fine.
Give me a pen and paper and ink, and I am happy. But put me in front of a keyboard, and I will argue with you for the whole day. So I started my business in the year 2000. I came across to the UK, and I went to the University of Reading and studied letterform history at Reading in their type department. And then I won a scholarship, and I went on to study calligraphy, gilding, and heraldic painting at Reigate School of Art and Design. And then I won another scholarship and had some money to go to Birkbeck. So I went off to Birkbeck and studied English paleography and manuscript history, Arabic calligraphy, and archaeological illustration. And the archaeological illustration was fascinating. It sort of got me interested in hieroglyphs again. I loved hieroglyphs as a child. And I went out to Egypt the following year, 2002, to draw hieroglyphs for the Metropolitan Museum of Art in one of their pyramids that they're doing research in. So that was amazing. And so my life it revolves around writing. I love writing in Western script, not necessarily Latin script, in non-Latin scripts, Eastern scripts. It's all about writing, and not just current writing, calligraphic practice, but also ancient writing practice, like Sumerian cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphs and Mayan hieroglyphs. I mean, I just love the fact that we're able to take something up here and translate it into something physical. So and the business started because I couldn't find a job. I did so well at art school. I graduated with a distinction every time, and the teachers tell you, "Oh, you're so good," and you're like, "Yeah, thank you," but they never teach you how to find work. So when I left art school, and I was sort of okay, so I have a distinction. What do I do now? And I realized that there weren't any calligraphy companies to go and work for. So I had to figure out how to find business. I sent out I sent letters to people, that I handwrote letters to people, and to PR companies. And then my big break came. Jaguar called me to do a job for them. They wanted 8,000 place cards for an event they were holding, a whole week event, and they wanted it in a week. So, and fortunately, I think I was 24. So I was able to sort of stay up for the whole week and get 8,000 place cards done. Couldn't do that now. And so the business grew organically because I'm not a businessman. I'm an artisan. I know very, very little about, turn this light down a little bit, very little about sort of business practice and process. You know, I paint and I cut quills and I love ink. And so the business grew, the business grew in this very, very organic way. And I got to the point where I needed help because I couldn't take the work on myself. And so I got some friends in to come and help because, of course, most calligraphers know each other. And you just say, oh, I need some help. And people turn up and they come and address some envelopes and do some place cards. And so I went from me to 4 of us in a studio very quickly. And then that went to 5. And then that went up to 6. And of course, I had to move premises because I didn't have enough space. There was more work coming in, more different kinds of work. The heraldry work sort of led me down a path which was interesting. I won the Scrivener's Award, the Worshipful Company of Scriveners. I won their award in the year 2000 while I was at Reigate. And I was at the award ceremony and this man comes up to me and he says, I really love your work. And I said, oh, thank you, thank you. You know, this is me at sort of, you know, 23 and a half. Very, very shy, very timid, a little bit shell-shocked by this really bizarre world of worshipful companies which date back to the Middle Ages. And he hands me a card and he says, I'll be in touch. And it just had a portcullis on it and his name. I was just like, what? I don't have a card. He said, oh, don't worry, I'll sort this out. And then I get a message to say, come to the Cholmondeley Gate at the Palace of Westminster and bring your passport. So, you know, I sort of, this is like 9 months later. I turn up there and I give them my passport. I have no idea what this is about. And he's waiting for me and they search me and they register me. And he says he said it took a while to go through your security checks. And he said, you're very well known. And I said, really? He said, yeah, we have a massive file on you now. It's like, oh, what is this about? And he said, well, you know, it's not often that we need someone. He said, but one of our scribes recently retired and the job is for life. And so we want you to handwrite the laws, some of the laws for the Queen to sign and they become a law. I said, sorry, what? And wow. So he took me up. I mean, Craig, this was, you know, just think of me growing up in Trinidad, never actually thinking I'd leave Trinidad, and ending up in this place, in, you know, Houses of Parliament. And so Ian took me up this little route, and then these massive stone stairs, and you go through this door, this tiny, tiny wooden door, and you go under the door, and you step back into the Middle Ages. And then you go up these big stairs and the Scriveners are in one of the turrets. And so that's one of the things I still do. I still handwrite some of the laws on vellum, on calfskin vellum that the Queen signs. There are 4 of us who do it. So it's really quite sort of surprising. And then the business grew, and you know we started.
Sorry, I need to go from there. You're 24 years old. You now write the laws that the Queen signs. That surely that's everything. You've achieved everything.
Well, you know, it's wow. Funny you say that. And then the next year, I went to Egypt, and a couple of years later, so that was 2002, so 26. So 2 years after that, I was just about to turn 28. I was at the British Museum doing some, you know, I love the British Museum, right? I would go to the British Museum every week. I would go. I'd just be like, oh, loved Egypt, and I went to see the Gate of Honor, which is this massive, massive sort of 4 meter by 5 meter piece of it, woodcut that Albrecht Dürer did for Maximilian I. And there was this woman giving a lecture on it, and I started asking these questions, and she said, you wait back. Stop asking questions, just wait back. And so I waited back and I was talking to her, and she said, you know a lot about Dürer. I said, Dürer is the reason I'm a scribe. She said, we have an exhibition coming up next year. It's the biggest exhibition of Jura artifacts and objects. We'd love for you to give a lecture. I said, what? Where? Here, at the British Museum. Oh. And so I gave the lecture, and a couple of days later, my mother calls me and she says, I need to talk to you about something. And I said, what? She said, do you remember when you were 9? And I said, oh no, Mommy, you can't remember that. How do you remember? How did you remember that? She said, Paul, when you, look, my eyes are filling up. She said, when you told me that, I cried so much because I thought there's no way I could help this child. So at 9 years old, she sort of flippantly said to me, what would you like to do when you grow up? And I said, oh, I want to work for the Queen of England, and I want to go to Egypt, and I want to give a lecture at the British Museum.
Wow.
And she said, Paul, I was so distraught because I'd never left Trinidad. I didn't even know the first thing about how to leave Trinidad. And there you are dreaming so big. I didn't know how to help you, she said, and you're not even 30 and you've accomplished those 3 things. You need to rethink your life and what you want to achieve. So, the business grew out of some great contacts. My first big job was Jaguar, then Joe Malone, then Tiffany's. I did the calligraphy for Tiffany's and Joe Malone for nearly 20 years. I did, tons of stuff for the Royal Academy, lots of wedding stuff, really high-end stuff. And then 5 years ago, 7 years ago, I stumbled across the Kuretake Fude 8 brush pen and went to Paper World, which I'd always wanted to go to, and started sort of talking with them about something. And I just turned up on their stand, and some of their staff knew me, and it was their whole international team. It was some of the Japanese team, some of the UK team, some of the American team. And I walked onto the stand, and they were like, "Oh my God, it's Paul Antonio!" And I walked up to Katie, who was demonstrating, and I said, "Is this table free?" And she just pushed everything into a bucket, and she went, "There you go. What products would you like?" And so I took some products off their shelves, and their managing director, he was sort of watching me going, what's happening here? And I was just taking products off their shelves. And I stood there and I said, ladies and gentlemen, can I interrupt you? And Japanese people don't like you to interrupt meetings. So I go over and I interrupt the meetings. I said, can I bring you over here to show you how these products work and how they work together? And I did a little demonstration, free demonstration for them for half an hour. And all of the people buying product tripled their orders. So Mr. Saki turns to me and he says, what are you doing in July? And I said, nothing. He said, I want you to come to the International Stationery Show in Tokyo to demonstrate for us. And I always wanted to go to Japan, but Tim went to Japan every 2 years with work. He said, I would love to take you. He said, but it's so expensive. And so I called him and I said, I'm going to Japan. And so that then ended me up at Creativation 4 years ago. And that's where I saw Denzel at Spellbinders. And Denzel said, we stood there opposite me, because of course Robin had been following me on Instagram for 5 years. So the Kuretake stand was here, I was here, and she called Kuretake and she says, is he coming? Is he coming? And they said, yeah, he's coming. And she said, what's your stand layout like? And they said, oh, well, he's here. And so she said to Denzel, because she was over here, she said to Denzel, can we rotate the stand so I'm opposite Paul? And Denzel was like, what's wrong with you, woman? And she said, please, please, please. So she got Denzel to rotate the stand so she was opposite me. So the day before we're setting up, I'm trying to set up, and Robin she's opposite me trying to set up. And every time I look up, she's like this. Oh. And so I went, you, come over here. So she comes over. I said, what's your name? She said, Robin. So she's talking to me, and I wrote her name, Robin. And I said, are you all right? She said, I just love you. Oh my gosh, I didn't want to say that. So I handed her her name, and she just burst into tears, and I gave her a hug and instant friendship. And she introduced me to Denzel, and Denzel was like, we have this new product coming out. And so that's how I got into the crafting industry, through Spellbinder. Well, through Robin, really. Of course, I've become really good friends with, Judy at Judy Kins, Judy's just so beautiful. And lots of really great people, but, it's been quite tricky for me to sort of alter my perception of my approach to my craft to make it a little bit more easier for the crafting industry, because when you work at the structure of what you do is so different. Trying to graft that onto different industries is a little bit tricky. So yeah, and then out of that, I decided to close the business because I just couldn't handle arguing with brides anymore. And as people got younger, their lack of understanding of the fact that something has to be handwritten in ink on paper, needs time to dry, meant that you were arguing with people because they couldn't understand. They were like, well, it's just writing. And you're like, it takes 15 minutes to address each envelope, and it takes a whole night for the ink to dry. And I was starting to not like what I was doing. And Tim said to me, you have so many options open to you. Why don't you take a break? And so I closed the studio, and Speedball contacted me because I was writing a book on copperplate script and I was using their nib. So they published my book, and then I started traveling to teach. And then I was back at Paper World, and I went onto the Rodea stand. I was chatting with the guys at Rodea. And so this is now 3 years ago. And they said, we'd like you to come to Mulhouse to see the factory. And I was just like, oh, okay, I'm there. Oh my God, a paper mill. Oh my God. So they flew me over, and they had an ulterior motive, which I didn't really understand. I was so excited to be going to see this paper mill, right? And I took tools and materials just to test some papers, and they had been having a problem with a product that they were trying to develop for like 2 years, and they couldn't quite sort of figure out how to do it. And I sat down and I tested like, I don't know, about 200 types of papers, and checked which ones worked with which, and put the papers together. And I said, oh, these will do this. And like, you solved a problem that we've not been able to fix. What would you like? And I said, what? He said, what would you like? And I said, I would love a PAScribe Rodea pad with my grid on it. And Geraldine, the brand director, said, well, we were planning to offer you that anyway. Is there anything else you'd like? And I said, oh, I'd love a black pad and a gray pad. And they went, okay. And in front, all these people in their suits, and I'm in a t-shirt, and I'm crying. Oh my God, thank you so much. And they're all sort of laughing, and they were so touched that I was so overwhelmed by this. And the pads came out at the beginning of lockdown, which messed up everything. It took 9 months for the pads to be shipped to Australia. But, they're around the world now, and they're doing well, and people love them. And, I always tell people, I design a product because I want it.
Yeah.
I'm not designing it and putting it on the market and hoping that it'll work. I'm designing it because what I'm coming up with does not currently exist, and I need this. I need this for myself. So I know if I need it, you definitely need it. And so the pads took off, and then of course lockdown happened, and all my work dried up because I had tons of traveling to teach. And so obviously I had to figure out Zoom and how Zoom works for teaching, and that was, I think, for non-tech people, that's a real obstacle, because I think that the issue here is not that it's an obstacle it's not simply an obstacle. You know, lots of crafters and artisans and artists, we have a really odd way of thinking. We can't read or have a class and internalize and assimilate and apply. You have this period where you're sort of grappling with yourself before you can even think about taking a class.
Yeah.
And so you have this really long time span of preparing yourself mentally and physically. And then it, you know, eventually when your brain goes, okay, I sort of see how to do this, but you know, you're not really that technically minded. So, and then how do you apply that to your particular way of teaching or your particular way of demonstrating? And where does the camera have to go so that you can actually see what you're doing? Because, you know, if you're sitting at a table doing something, people can see, they could walk around you, they could do all kinds of things. So it took a lot of thinking to get that up and running. And of course, while all of this was happening, I work with a really good friend of mine called Telmo. He's in Portugal, and he does all my graphics work. And so we've been working on this this product. So the pads came out, and I had said to Rodia, so the lines on the black and the gray pad, they're at 6 mil, because you can write a really beautiful letter at 6 mil. I mean, I have tons of them. I'll grab some and I'll show you in a sec. But if you want to write smaller, you don't have another line. So I said, oh, could you do one at 3 mil? You know, they were like, no, Paul, really. So I started to think, how can I get lines onto a lined pad that would give you 1 mil or 2 mil or 3 mil or 4 mil or 5 mil, and the pad's already 6 mil. But also, how can I get angles on it as well? Because if you're doing copper plate script, you want a 55-degree angle. If you're doing Spencerian, you want 52. If you're doing italic, it might be 5 or 10 degrees off the vertical. So I came up with this template, this really sort of magical template with cuts and holes and this. And we had it prototyped in the UK, which cost an arm and a leg. I was so shocked at how expensive prototyping is. Just remember, if I prototype something, I make it up in card, right? Yeah. And so the PAScribe prototype came out really well. It got me to figure out what wasn't working. And so we did 3 prototypes in 3 different stages. And one of the groups that I was working with, who I was going to contact, I was going to go out to Malaysia at the end of the year to do a sort of 3-week tour with their shops, talking about the pads and showing how some of the Rodia products work. And that, obviously, that was cancelled. And I just reached out to them and said, I need some help. I'm trying to find somebody who can make some PAScribe products cheaply, and not too cheaply, but not at, because the products here cost £60. £60 for one, for this, right? I was like, I can't sell that on at £60.
Yeah.
And he said, and so they said, so this is Ziply in Malaysia. So they then said to me, oh yeah, we can do this. So I said, oh, okay. So they looked into it and they mocked it up. I came up with some packaging. And so I have my first product, mine. Wow. With my name coming out. I mean, obviously the Rodia pads are out, and they're beautiful. I mean, they are so beautiful. So I have my own product coming out, and yeah, so lockdown's been good and it's been bad, but it's been a really steep learning curve.
I think to your point, and I say this quite a lot to creatives, and that's why the association is important. And it's not a plug, but this is why the association is important. It's because you guys are all creatives. You have that creative mind, that completely different mindset of creating and engaging and inspiring people. You may not well be business people or tech savvy or whatever. And that's where an association comes in, where you can kind of talk to people that might know and might be able to help you and hold your hand and get through it. And then on your point that you said, that, you know, that the last 323 days of this COVID pandemic has been difficult on people, as Paul, as you well know, because I believe you've suffered for it quite severely, haven't you? And now coming off the back end of
Yeah.
it. So pleased you're healthy, but also it's given us
Thank you.
time to take a step back and reevaluate our business, and not. I mean, we see each other maybe 2 times, 3 times a year at various different trade shows and events. But actually, we get caught up in this fierce loop, ever massive circle that we just continuously trade show, workshop, event, workshop, trade show. And you never take a step back and go, right, what do I need to do? What do I love? So, I mean, you've done some amazing stuff to get you to where you are today. And obviously now coming up with your own products. Now, I don't want to give too much away, but are there more products in the pipeline for yourself? Is this the way you're going to go? Fantastic. We're looking forward to that.
So
now, also tell
I love teaching. I love sharing information. And you look at my Instagram and you look at my YouTube, and I have so many people saying to me, "God, you give away so much free content." And I say to people, yeah, but you know, if you think of all the free content that I'm giving you on this one script, if I can give away that much on this one script, imagine how much there is that I'm not actually giving away, because there's only so much content that you can give away. And then you know, obviously you have to set up classes, and the content is there to support people who set up the class, who attend classes. But I'm also really conscious of the fact that, you know, when I was growing up, I said to my mother, "Oh, can I get some nibs?" And she said, "I'm sorry, son, you know, they're too expensive." Because a nib was 25 pence, which in Trinidad was £2.50, which was the cost of a bottle of beer. So when you start extrapolating, you know, so I want 10 nibs, right? You know, you just sort of, you really start to understand how the cost, you know, is problematic in developing countries. And I was really fortunate. I worked really hard. I won scholarships, and I went to school and I studied and I topped my class in everything, because I really understood. Mommy always used to tell us, your only way out of this is through education. And so when I teach a workshop, I always give a full and a partial scholarship, because I know that there are talented people who simply don't have the money to do it. And equally, you know, it's the same thing with information. There are lots of people out there on Instagram, and, you know, I have lots of followers in India, and they really struggle with learning because the exchange rate is impossible for them. But when you have content online and you're sharing, then that content reaches people who need it, and it can help them to make a decision as to whether or not they want to follow this path. And consequently, you know, in my mind, your students should never have to reinvent the wheel. You are a teacher, and it's your responsibility to give them the wheel that you are working on. So you've had your teacher's wheel. You didn't have to reinvent the wheel. You just decorated it a little bit more. And now you're giving it to them for them to decorate it a little bit. And they might find a better way to refine it or something. And that also comes with products, because a lot of the products we have, they were made for other things. They weren't specifically made for calligraphers by calligraphers. So we have to sort of retrofit the product and try and figure out how to use it for us. So I started coming up with these ideas. I have like 80 products, right, Craig? I have 80 ideas for things that I would sit down and go, "Oh, this is really difficult to do. I wonder how I could make this easier to do." And then you have an idea, and you're like, "Oh, that'd be a nice product." So you write it down. And so there's all these products that I'm planning, because they will make the practice of calligraphy easier to get to. People hate lines. They hate ruling lines. Well, if you have something that helps rule the lines quicker, more accurately, then you could get to the writing. So so you know, it's about sort of enabling practitioners to practice.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what the products are about. And then of course there's the classes. So with Zoom, I started teaching. I've set up the classes in a very specific way because I have a lot of historical knowledge about manuscripts and the history and development of the alphabet, which is something most calligraphers don't tend to have. So I do a lot of research, and calligraphers tend to write. They want to write. They don't want to read about the writing. I love reading about the writing, and I love the writing. So I decided to set up my classes in this series where we have a lecture talking about the history of the script. We have this massive lecture coming up next week where I'm covering 3,500 years of the Western alphabet, and it's amazing. I love this lecture. And it really gives you a nice timeline. And then every month we have a script lecture on a Tuesday and a workshop on a Sunday. So and you know, with the lectures, I've kept the lectures at £5 because, you know, people have said to me, oh, it should be more expensive. And, you know, it's 2 hours of talking and then an hour of question and answer. But again, you know, I keep coming back to this social responsibility thing because people don't have money. You know, they're struggling, and to give them, I mean, if I could do it for free, I'd do it for free. But, you know, to give them that, you know, 2 hours of information for £5, then they can decide, oh, I really like the script. Maybe I'll do the one on Sunday. I'll do the workshop. Or you just learn about the script because you might want to learn the script physically, do a workshop in 6 months' time. And, you know, I teach Reiki and I do healing as well. And I was really concerned that a lot of people were just struggling mentally. So I set up this calligraphy and meditation class. And again, I kept the price down at £5 because I wanted people to have access to it and to have a safe space. And we have a community group where you can join and post work and comment and talk about things and, you know, interact with other people. And so, you know, the mental health sort of aspect of it is really important to me. And calligraphy is very meditative. You watch people write calligraphy and you're just like, oh, look at that. Wow. Yeah. So getting people to actually do the writing and understand, because the calligraphy and meditation class is only a pencil and making straight lines on a rule, just like a normal pad. And it gives you a different way to meditate. And so, you know, it's for me, it's about teaching, it's about helping, it's about, you know, sort of connecting people, and just sort of, you know, making things accessible. Of course, you know, I could charge more for the classes and the workshops and the lectures, but then you don't reach the people who really, you know, you don't reach that segment of the population who can't afford it and who it would, you know, it would change their life. So
it's so admirable, and I totally get it. All the links, by the way, if people are watching, are going to be in the bio, and there's going to be a news post put out as well. I will definitely share those links for you. But I totally get you know, the social aspects of the pricing, especially when there's a lot of the world going through difficult times, which again is why we're putting these things on, so people can connect with you and hear your story. So I possibly know some of the challenges that you've had over 2020, but you seem to overcome them. I'm not going to go on to them too much in terms of the trials and tribulations, but just to let everybody know that Paul had COVID and suffered quite badly with it, and is now out of the other side, thank the Lord, and healthy. And he should be taking it easy, but no, he's still designing and creating products. Now, I'm not too sure.
I am taking it easy.
Well, you say that, so I'll have a word with your husband. He'll tell me different. I know that for a fact. But it is good to see you, and I'm so pleased that you're kind of back and you've got things going on, and people are going to enjoy the workshop. So just for people that might want to get into the business, that might want to start doing maybe workshop classes as the world starts opening up, is there any kind of tips and advice and yeah, any top tips that you might have for them, and how also people might be able to work with you if possible?
I think I think let's start with how do you get into it. I always tell people the first thing you want to do is you want to think about what you actually want to do with this. Because if it's just some pretty writing that you want to do, and you're not really that fast, and it's you're not going to spend a lot of time studying, and you just want to pick up something and write with it, then that's a very different mindset and a very different approach to if you're thinking. I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and he was saying, I want to do like pub signs when things open up, and I really want to take this quite seriously. That's a very, very different thing. If you're also thinking, well, and you see this is slightly problematic now, because historically most calligraphers did jobbing work where you addressed envelopes for weddings and big events, and you'd have like, I once did this African wedding. We had 6,000 envelopes to send out. It's like, how many villages are you inviting? We did an Indian wedding and they had 12,000 guests. And you're just like, wow. And that was like when weddings were in their heyday. But as we go back to some kind of normalcy and the world does start opening up, you're not going to get that kind of wedding work again. Governments are still going to restrict large numbers. Even with fashion events, you're not going to get, I used to do all the calligraphy for Burberry, for Asprey, for all the big brands, and they would have events for like 1,200 people. So you're not just writing the names, your name and full business address, just like 6 lines. So every envelope could cost anywhere between £6 to £10. You're not going to get that again happening, not for a very long time. So if you are thinking about calligraphy as a business, you really need to do your market research on it. Don't just jump into it and hope that you're going to make a living from it. It's a lot of investment in time and money and product. So if you're starting off, there are lots of simple ways to start off. Start off with a pencil, just a pencil and a pad. Practice the letters, try and build your accuracy. Make sure that when you're writing letters, if you're working between 2 lines, we call those a baseline and an X height. So things like the letter X touches both lines, the letter O and A. And so you want to touch both lines. So you're building accuracy, because it's that kind of thing that makes the calligraphy more beautiful, because the letters are even in height and space and shape and deposition of pigment. And then, of course, if you decide to do modern calligraphy, the letters are a little bit more playful, but it's still about consistency of shape and form across the page. So if that's your aim to start off, then that's how you start. Have a plan. I didn't have a plan. I left university. I was like, oh, I'm going to do this and this and this. And but 20 years ago, things were a lot simpler. You need a plan now. You need a structured plan, so you know when you're studying, when you're doing the research, when you're going to put in the practice. And your study, your research, and your practice are 3 different things. They don't happen at the same time. So you need to plan this out. If you're practicing, practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and do research on a Thursday and do studying on a Tuesday. So you have time, because treat it like a job, so that on the weekend you have the weekend off. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. There are some great products out there. Most important thing about practicing is make sure that your materials work together. There's no point in buying a beautiful nib and ink that's scented with mica particles sparkling in it, and really beautiful handmade paper, and none of them working together. So start cheap. Pencil, paper, next move to a marker.
How do you find out?
Yeah.
How do you find out what works with each other, like the pen, the ink, and the paper? Because obviously they're basic requirements, aren't they? That's silly to say, But how do you know what works with each other? Is it that you just buy the same brand of pen, ink, and pad, or I mean, how would you know? How would you know what to buy?
So you know, Craig, that's great. And you know what? It's not silly to even think about that question, because most people never ask that question. And so they go out and they spend money, and then they get the stuff back and it doesn't work together. There are brands or groups that make paper, inks, nibs, markers, but they don't work together. So even saying, okay, I'm going to stick to this one brand, you might find that their products don't work together because the brands were originally separate, and then they were purchased and they sort of became this group. So they weren't made to work together.
Right.
And the first thing that you have to figure out is, what do you want to learn? Once you know which script you want to learn, you can then figure out which tools and materials. So people say, oh, I want to learn calligraphy. Okay, that's great. Can you help me? Yes, of course I can help you. Which script would you like to learn? Oh, I just want to learn calligraphy. And I'm like, yes, but calligraphy covers, you know, well over 300 Western scripts. Which one of them would you like to learn? Because as soon as you work that out, you can then work out what tools and materials you need. And, you know, by a process of elimination, you can sort of work through fairly quickly. You would always, I always tell students, use a marker. You know, there's some great markers on the market. You use a marker, you don't have to deal with the nib and the reservoir, because the reservoir is supposed to be at 1.5 millimeters from the tip of the nib. And if you put it on too tightly, the tines cross, so you can't write. So there's all of this stuff that you have to figure out as you start using more complex tools. Use a marker. There's less chance of it bleeding on the paper that you have, and you don't have to worry about the paper too much, because the marker will most probably work. Maybe 90% the marker will work. And there's no ink. So once the marker is, once you've written and the writing's dry, you're not going to, you know, some people are really clumsy. They reach for something and they knock over the whole bottle of ink. There's no ink to do that with. And so you're building an understanding of how to not be messy. Because when you get to the point that you need ink, then you're a little bit more, you have more understanding of the pad should sit here, the ink should sit there, this should sit there, because you're sort of slowly learning about the process of the materials. And then eventually, you know, you might, so there are two options. You either start with broad edge or you start with pointed pen or brushes. And it's very easy. There's tons of people out there to help. I have content online that talks about these things. And, you know, in my manual on copperplate script, I did a little grid with nib, ink, and paper. And I put which nibs and which inks worked with which papers, because you just don't realize how much there is out there. And especially when you're starting off, you're like, oh, you're so excited. And then you see the products and you get excited. You're like, oh, I'll buy this and this and this. And then they don't work. But the other thing is, you also have to look at your skill level, because there are products not made for beginners. You know, and if you buy a product that an intermediate skill level person uses, you've just wasted your money. You're going to damage the product. And so you are wasting your money. And then you won't be able to use the product when you get to the stage where you can use it. So, you know, don't rush into the learning of calligraphy. Sit down, think it through, make a list, talk to calligraphers. You know, most calligraphers are generally quite approachable. You know, people always say to me, oh my God, you answered my message. I'm like, I answer all my messages. And, you know, if somebody took the time to write to me, I will take the time to reply. And so it's quite funny when people are like, oh, but you're the calligraphy god.
You are indeed.
You know, oh my gosh, I can't believe you wrote to me. Oh my gosh. And you know, they repost it because I always go to people's pages and I look at their work and I like their work and I comment. And they're like, oh my God, I Paul Antonio. You see this big sort of post. Oh my God, I'm crying. I'm crying.
That is fantastic. And honestly, great top tips and advice there. Thank you very much. Well, we're going to have to wrap up soon. But lastly, but no least, I'm doing this thing for this year, and I know it's the 2nd of the month, and hopefully I'll continue it on. But rather than New Year's resolutions that we all make and maybe don't keep, words of intent, a couple of words that you hold dear that you want to achieve for this year. Do you have those? What are your first initial thoughts of a word that would describe what you want to happen to you this year?
You know, there are a few words that come to mind. You know, one of the first words that come to mind is gratitude. You know, after being in the hospital, and, you know, there was one night that my temperature had gone up to 42 degrees and the nurses were panicking. They were like, and I was lying there in the bed and I thought, I'm not going to make this. And I knew, I could feel my body failing. And I just thought, I'm never going to see Tim. I'm never going to see my mother, my family. And then, you know, I sort of turned the corner and the nurse was crying. She said, oh my God, I couldn't lose somebody else today. And I was so grateful to be alive. And in my posts, I'm always conscious about being grateful to people who help, and being grateful to God for, you know, always being there, because, you know, I don't know how people get through life not having a relationship with God, because life is hard enough on its own. And that gratitude is really, really helpful. And, you know, like when people do good things for me, I will write their name and make a video of it and send it to them. And you have no idea what that person is going through, and how much that little thank you is going to make a difference. And as you start being more grateful, you start to see things differently. Like you start to see, you know, when I leave the studio, I always say, okay, bye boys, I'll see you tomorrow. And the first time I did it, Tim saw me do it. He said, what are you doing? I said, I always thank the tools and materials in the studio, because without them, I would be nowhere. And that immediately changes your response to your tools, your materials, your working area. And then you start to be a little bit more careful with the way you deal with other people. One of the other words that I'm really conscious of is peace. You know, having peace in your life is, it is just the best thing. When people start arguing with you, you go, hang on a second, I'm too old for this, really. You know, I'm 46. I've had to put up with enough crap in my time. I don't need to listen to this. You want to argue with somebody, go over there and argue. And then you start getting rid of people who really just wreak havoc. And as you become more peaceful, your brain becomes more active. You start to process things differently. You start to think about products that you want to make. You start to interact with people who want to interact with you, and you're at the same level, so you're helping each other. And that peace helps you to move forward. It helps you to find the mental and emotional capacity to do things that you've not been able to do, because when you're not at peace, you can't think beyond your nose. So you can plan better. You can plan to do like courses, or you can plan to help other people. I'm talking about it. I have goose pimples all down my back, because, you know, once you have those two things, everything else starts to happen. You know, if you want to learn something, if you want to build something, if you want to expand, you need the headspace for it, and you need that peace. Otherwise, you're just sort of running around in a circle like a dog chasing its tail, and you get stressed. Of course, you know, we can't be stressed now, because as you get stressed, your immune system starts to get weaker, and as soon as your immune system gets weaker, you get COVID.
Yeah.
So it's really important, you know, that we're, and not just in January or February. I mean, that I'm not going to lie to you. It is not easy changing, having that shift, that mental shift where, you know, you're so accustomed to being angry about something. Oh, I can't believe this happened. Instead of, and now you're sort of going, oh, I can't believe it. You know what? There's a reason this happened, and it will become apparent. It might become apparent today or tomorrow, but it'll become apparent. And you just learn to be at peace with it, because the stress of it is not good. So what are your watchwords?
Mine is I say, listening to what you're saying, peace is a really good one, but I think it's very difficult, very easy to say, and obviously because you've been through so much over the last 6 months anyway, it's more focused on you. It's easy to say, very hard to do sometimes. You're absolutely right in that fact. Of sometimes you have these internal battles, and you know, a great friend of mine has always said, pick your battles. But actually, I shouldn't be picking battles. I should just be letting them go and you know, just get a different piece. And I think we spoke before this. We were saying, you know, there's good and bad about this pandemic, and the good part about it is you've been able to take a step back and have more clarity of life, and also appreciate things a great deal. You know, my words are challenge. I want to challenge myself to be a better person of myself. That is to do things that A, I take for granted. B, I kind of go, oh, don't worry about that. They'll be fine. But actually start pushing myself, challenging myself to go, well, actually pick up the phone, do this, do that, challenge myself to pick up books and just do things that are different. You know, we all talk about in the business world about changing and adapting and pivoting and all these sorts. We should be doing that anyway, you know. But when life gets difficult, we should be able to adapt to it and change. That should just be a part of our makeup now. So my first word is challenge. My second word is balance. And I've been in this industry 20 years, and I don't think I've ever switched off. And I've never balanced my work-life balance. I've never done that. And again, this pandemic has shown me that actually, what's more important, the business side of things or my family and friends around me? Well, I think we know the answer to that. You know, we can all have a business and start a business, but I think it's the balance, you know, of that and making sure that I have a good life-work balance. I also want to have a balance in my mind, so gives me more clarity of what am I doing and why am I doing it. So these are the things that I want to try to do. I think it's really important. And
nice.
Touch on it is, it's great to have a why, but why are you doing it? What is your end goal? How is that going to make a difference to you, your business, and also the people that you're doing it for? Why is that? Why? Understanding that, and I think that's important. And so that balance, I want to make sure is right. So I think those are my words. But I love yours. I mean, gratitude and peace are absolutely beautiful. And I guess that's obviously happened in the last couple of months, hasn't it? Really, I guess.
You know, it's just, you know, so many of my friends got ill. I lost all my work. I had to rethink a lot about what was happening. I'm working on this academic proposal, which I'd been working on for a year, and I just sort of shelved it because I didn't think I had the capacity to do it. And, you know, lying in the hospital bed, I sort of thought, I really want to do this thing. And it made me sort of rethink my life and prioritize things that I really, really want to do. And really just sort of, you know, really make a difference in my own life. And that meant, it also meant making some harsh decisions on what was not going to happen. Because, you know, I always tell people I'm really lucky that I figured out what wanted to and could do at a very early age. But that meant that, you know, there was so much to do. And so now I'm sort of, I have to sit back and go, and I always tell people, you can't do everything. Everybody says, oh, you'll never find the time to do everything. You know, I wanted to do sign painting. I wanted to do this. And I thought, you know what, you can't do everything. Just focus on the manuscript stuff. But it's even more niche now, because it's not that you can't do everything that you can do. You still can't do everything that you think you can do. So out of that list of all those things that you thought that you could do, you know, like, you know, for 2 days, for two weeks, I couldn't even string a sentence together. After I came out from the hospital, I couldn't speak. I couldn't type. I'd start typing and you'd look at the screen and it was like, you just press the keyboard like this. And I couldn't read. I would start reading and the end of the sentence would collapse. And, you know, and the doctor said, you know, you're looking at 6 months of this. And so I started to realize even the things that I thought I could do, I cannot do. I cannot find the time nor the energy level to do it with. And so it really forces you to refocus on what is absolutely essential. And people say, oh, I have, you know, this is essential and this is essential. And then you have a list of 20 essential things. But what's absolutely essential? And then you really start to focus on those things and your life changes because you realize, oh, I'm doing the thing that I wanted to do 10 years ago. Because you've refocused your attention and your energy, and then you start to be grateful because you're like, well, I'm really grateful that I'm at this point now. And, you know, even having to go through COVID, you know, I'm really grateful that I'm alive. I'm really grateful that I can make these decisions. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, look, my friend, I'm going to say thank you so much for your time and sharing
Not at all.
insights, your thoughts. For anybody that wants to know more about Paul, about his work, about his workshops, all the contact details are in the links below, or you can find them on the links. And there's a slide at the end of this with all the links on. So please connect with Paul if you want to do his classes. Again, Paul, have a blessed day. Be well. Take care of yourself. Take it easy. And again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Greg. Have a good week ahead.
Thanks to you, sir. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.